And, first of all, welcome everybody. Glad to have you here. Let me turn this over to Stephanie Hawkins, our Vice President of Community Outreach and Engagement.
Thank you, Aaron. Aaron is my partner in these BAs on the Street, and today is April 10th, 2024, and we had the honor of talking with Cathy Krist tonight. Say hi, Cathy.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks.
So for those that it's the first time that you've joined us for BAs on the Street, it is a series that we do for the IIBA Bluegrass chapter, where we talk to BAs on the street. A lot of times we have backgrounds that shows us on some street, some sidewalk cafe, etc. But in honor of Cathy in the Green Spring, I thought I'd have her picture up instead. And so what we do during this series is we just have a conversation, meaning there goes Aaron. Okay, perfect. Where we sit and we talk, we ask questions, we try to get to know Cathy and things about her. And so it's an interactive session. So if you have questions that you'd like, feel free to put them in the chat. Aaron's monitoring it. And so get ready, everyone. We're going to get started and get to learn more about Cathy. All right. So Cathy, welcome once again. And if you would like, do you want to give a short bio or tell us a little bit about yourself and about and then maybe get into your BA background? Whoops, Cathy's on mute.
You're on mute, Cathy.
How did I get on mute?
There we go.
Cathy cannot find the mute button.
I think it was Aaron. Aaron.
I'm gonna blame Aaron.
Let's say it was Aaron.
I'll blame him. So anyways, I was saying I really am on the street now because I have, for those who don't know, I have recently retired in the past month. So after 45 years, I've been in the field in one role or another.
Congratulations.
So it's kind of time to. It was either time for me to hang up or they might kick me out. Who knows? But now after I've been at it for about 45 years. I have a degree business or degree in computer science. BS, go figure. A BS in computer science. and I started my career as a programmer analyst.
Wow.
So I've always been an analyst. But that kind of is because that was the title at the time. So I started as a programmer, but from the time, and I began as a co-op. So okay. I was actually the first co-op at Goodyear Tire and Rubber, and this was back. I hate to share my age.
You don't have to tell the year.
I'm just saying.
Back in the day.
Engineers were co-oping for engineers was typical, but not for computer science. It was a time there were actually only 2 schools in Ohio that even offered the degree. So
wow.
Yeah, so I started Goodyear they had a manager looking for a co-op, and whatever reason he wanted to see what it was like to have a computer science co-op. So I started my career at Goodyear Tire and Rubber as a co-op, which was wonderful because as a co-op I worked in 5 different departments in the company. And it gave me a nice broad view of different things you can do and how companies are using the computer field. So that's where I started. But at that time, there was no such thing as a business analyst. You did everything. So you're a jack of all trades. So even the very first program I did as a co-op, I had an assignment, but I had to figure out what does the assignment entail, what's needed, what am I supposed to do. So I had to figure out, what am I building? How's it supposed to look? What's the end result supposed to look like? Then I had to design it. Then I had to code it. Then I had to test it. Then I had to implement it. Then I had to deliver it. Then I had to support it.
Wow.
So that's the life I grew up in, doing all those different roles. As time went on, that changed. The industry changed, and there became more and more definition to some of these different things. But that was a slow process.
Wow, it sounds like it was a natural fit for what your career evolved into, because especially as a co-op starting out, being able to have the wherewithal or the understanding of needing to do from beginning to end, current state, elicitation, all the what we know now as BA techniques and things. But at that time, it was just like, okay, who are these people? What do they need? And how do I make it happen and get sign off? So going from like a technical background, right? Because your degree was technical. Did you find that was like a really good fit to have that technical background, but then just kind of like pick up and integrate yourself within like the BA role?
Well, for me, it was a good fit because the whole process of programming, I knew that side of the house.
Okay.
So, I kind of knew, as a general statement, what programmers need to know, how to go about testing. What are you looking for? I mean, so knowing, and that's a big thing as a BA, because you sit in the middle of users versus, the technical field, and you're trying to be a liaison to the business side, and that knowing both sides of that is really important. And knowing the testing was probably one of the biggest things. I've always been, because I had that role of developer and support, and people don't give enough credit, I don't think, to people that do support. If you don't test well, you're going to have a lot of failures after, and nobody likes that.
Right.
So I've always been a big proponent of really vigorous testing. Some people say maybe I'm too bent on it, but that's an area important to me. And I think a lot of that is because I have that background of, I had to code it, and I made sure when I coded it that I didn't want to call at 2 o'clock in the morning. So
right.
those kind of things were important. So that added a lot to the BA role. But so as my career shifted around and the distinction between those roles became more and more visible, I was still able to communicate with those. Even if I wasn't actually doing the role, I could communicate to them because I knew about the role.
Okay, great. Wow. So back to like just starting out, right? Because you've had a lengthy career with many, many successes. So in doing that, did your leaders or the people that you worked for, did they realize like the role that you were morphing into? Like, did they understand what it is that they were asking, or was it just they had a need and they didn't have awareness until later? Because I'm trying to figure out like when maybe your leaders realized the fit that you were for the role that you're doing, right? Technical skills plus all these others combined in this amazing package.
So that's a hard one to answer because, like I said, my career kind of shifted around me. And as the industry changed, I found myself, I programmed in multiple languages, but as time went on, when I started, it was mainframe. It was a mainframe world. And then next, then you got the mid-ranges coming on, and then which picked up some different kind of programming. And then you got the splurge of, the server-based and stuff like that. So then you have this explosion of program languages and stuff. And and all kinds of applications now are showing up. So I got into more and more support of things that had more specialized program coders. So it was kind of, I'll say, kind of a drift. And I was always in a forefront role with the user community. So I always had that role. And it just became more and more of that as coding became more specialized, and I drifted away from the coding. And to say, did my bosses recognize that? I guess somewhere they did. I did eventually get assigned. One of my assignments was the title was a user liaison for an application that I had no responsibility for coding. I was responsible for user interaction, user liaison, fielding questions, training, and a big part of that was determining, is this training? Is this a defect? is this a new request? And figuring that out. And at that point was probably the pivotal point, I'd say, where, the boss had said to assign me this role, and they had asked me about it, and they had told me, you'd probably be a good fit for this. At about that time is when the whole IIBA was coming around, and I sat down and talked to my management about that, and because it was something that appeared like, this kind of sounds like what I do.
Wow.
So they kind of converged at that point. But yeah, I mean, it was not a leap over that said, oh, instead of being over here in technical, can you come over here? It was one that was a gradual. I guess I drifted away from the coding because it had become so specialized.
Right. And so with that, I mean, you think about all of the things that you were doing and all the things that you ended up doing for the rest of your career, and to be able to be so multifaceted, to be able to be on that technical side, morph or evolve into being able on the user side to where you had that skill set for both. That's an impressive skill set, right? Very multifaceted. And so then when you went from the technical side into where you're really just engaged, doing less coding, more of that, and then you not realized, but like the IIBA community was there, did you feel like it was you found your people? Because I have a personal story about finding my people with IIBA, because I had more from there, and then one day it was like, this is my community, right? So do you have anything you could share there?
Yeah, so like I said, I had been very fortunate. I've worked in a lot of industries. I've worked at a variety of companies, and even within companies, I worked at big companies and had a wide range of assignments that exposed me to all kinds of different things. So I would say I had that advantage. So I could use a lot of different skills depending on what I was doing. But when I got onto that assignment as a user liaison, and that was basically all I did was work with users with this application and stuff. And when I don't even know where I heard about the IIBA, but and I heard about the Cincinnati IIBA was just starting, and it sounded like, it's like, this sounds like what I do. So I went and attended, and it's like, yeah, this sounds like what I do. That's where because I didn't know that there was a field for this. I mean, I was doing it. I didn't know that this was a thing. I just thought it was the need I'm filling in my company, but I didn't know it was a thing. And which is what drove me to the IIBA, because when I started hearing about it, it's like, oh, well, this is what I do. And that's what got me onto the certification, because I felt like I was still struggling with trying to understand, is this really a career thing, or am I just working on a job assignment? Is this really a career? So the certification was a real personal goal of mine, because it gave me some confirmation to me that, yeah, this is a career, and I can do it, and I'm good at it. And so, I mean, it was a personal thing that gave me that confirmation.
Now, when you were studying for your CBAP, and you earned it, and then did you realize where it was going to take you? I mean, eventually over the years, right? I mean, we get degrees, we learn new things, but just the evolution over time of like the practice itself, more and more BA techniques of things like you naturally did when you were a co-op, but really became like a named thing with people trying to perfect it and teach other people these same techniques.
I didn't know where it was going to take me. I didn't know that it would actually land me a job and that kind of stuff. And where I was working, I knew, I mean, it was a personal goal. So I knew it was never something that said, oh, I'm going to get a job. Oh, I'm going to get a raise. I mean, it was never that. And it was always just a self goal, a personal goal and accomplishment that just reinforced to me that, okay, this is my career. And it definitely opened my eyes to confirm that the techniques I was using were good, but gave me new ones, helped me perfect the ones I was using. Because when I started, the techniques I was using were things that just made sense to me. So by pursuing that certification and exposing myself to the broader range of things, definitely made a big difference. And, you know, I was the first one to get it at my company. And so that became a big deal.
Wow.
So
That is a big deal. What can you share? What company you were with?
I was with Kroger at the time. I was with Kroger at the time.
Okay.
And they had started a large BA Center of Excellence. And actually, I'll go back. If I go back to, I got it when I was with Kroger, but I was kind of on that path when I was with Chiquita. I was with Chiquita first for 12 years and then 17 years with Kroger. So my path was definitely going down that analytical road in Chiquita. And I had managers who sat me down and said, have you ever thought of doing, it's like, have you thought of doing this as a consultant?
Wow.
Because, I mean, at the time, I mean, it was, I just can't stress enough that these are times when you were a one-man show.
Right.
So it's hard to imagine today. People are so used to having all the different roles.
Right.
And
Defined
then
roles.
yeah, and then when I got to Kroger, that's when I actually pursued certification.
Wow. So in thinking about, you know, we in our community, we talk to BAs that are just new BAs, people that, you know, are just learning it. They're trying to even just understand what a BA is, and is this something that they're interested in. We talk to people mid-range that, you know, are really focusing and maybe they have certifications or don't. To me, it sounds like throughout your whole career, you've had a lot of successes because you were a natural BA. I mean, it was skills that you enjoyed doing and pursued, and people recognize that in you. So do you feel that because you called it the drift earlier, but you kind of drifted and flowed and ebbed with it and was able to be to flex and learn and new jobs? Do you feel your greatest professional accomplishment as a BA was getting the sort of being able to be that Swiss Army knife that you could just morph and do what you needed to do to drive value?
The certification didn't give me that capability. The certification was something I earned because I already had that ability and that drive for confirmation for myself.
Okay.
Getting a certification doesn't suddenly give you these skills.
Right.
You know, you've worked on those skills in order to even apply for that certification.
Right.
My background, I mean, I had a major in computer science and a minor in math, and so I already had that logical thinking process, and I kind of just think that way, and I'm a strong problem solver. So those skills just were well suited for what I was doing. When you're in analysis, and even as a BA today, you're doing problem solving. And what the certification did was point me towards a training path of recognizing some of the techniques and things that
Right.
From that aspect. But it's not like you, because you get a certification, suddenly you've got this. It takes a lot of diligence and persistence to apply yourself to these things. I mean, forget about the certification. That, like I said, to me, that was just a confirmation for myself that it's like, okay, yeah, this fits, what I do fits in line with what they say is this career path.
Right. And there is a lot of time and dedication that goes into exploring and becoming really, really good at being a BA. I think many times people really don't understand the skill that it needs to take, the passion behind it, the curiosity, and just, you know, not everybody is an extrovert. So not only learning and morphing, but just building the skills to be a people person to where you can have engagement with others. Did you learn any new people skills along the way that like
Oh my
really
gosh.
helped take that technical background and then, like, you know, a little bit of
I
frosting?
had a lot of eye-opening experiences in that along those lines. And like I said, I was very fortunate that I was at big companies. You know, when I worked at Goodyear Tire and Rubber, I worked in, I mean, that company has all kinds of different industries within an industry. Same with Chiquita. You would think it's bananas. Well, you'd be surprised what goes on to bring a banana into the country. So I had opportunities to work in all kinds of different disciplines within those companies, which expose you to all kinds of people. I mean, and one of the very first lessons, when I thought back, one of the first lessons I learned, one of my early assignments at, after I hired on full time at Goodyear, we were supporting the workers on the loading dock receiving product in. When they receive a truckload in, we had receiving software we had developed. And one of the things I learned on support call, we took turns on support. And so I'm talking to one of these support guys, and he couldn't get, we had 30, for those, I'll date myself, 3270 monitors, and that he couldn't get the application running. He couldn't get the monitor working. So I'm talking to him, and you really have to work hard with them, especially with somebody who their perspective is totally different. Working on a keyboard, this predates home computers, so nobody had a home computer. So he didn't have keyboard skills. And at the time you had to type in commands, mainframe commands to get things going. And I discovered, I still even remember this, telling him the command had a colon in it. He did not know what a colon was. So now I had to describe to him, help him find on the keyboard, because you couldn't say, well, it's above the semicolon, because he didn't know what the semicolon.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, and I'm not trying to denigrate this gentleman, but that just wasn't his life. So I learned very early on that your end user has a totally different perspective of what you're doing compared to what I had. I mean, even asking them, it's like, what do you see on the screen? Nothing. It's totally blank. Well, the only thing is there's this line that goes in and out. That was a cursor.
Cursor, right.
The cursor flashing. At that time, it was just a, it was just a dash. And to him, it's going in and out. So learning to, when you listen to people, trying to put yourself into their perspective, which is hard to do. And every time you talk to another person, it's different. I had truck drivers that, that English wasn't even their first language. So again, not being used to keyboards, not being used to a mouse, not being used to, maybe, like I said, language might not be their first, English might not be their first. So when you're dealing with different people, and like I said, I've dealt with all kinds of, at all levels. I've dealt with them at all levels. Everyone's different, and everybody has a different perspective, and trying to understand that perspective is probably one of the challenges, because that makes a huge difference in how you talk to them and what information you garner from them, because it's up to you to figure that out. I mean, they'll tell you, I mean, users are great to tell you information, but you got to tell them what you need.
Right.
And to tell them what you need, they have to understand the question or what you're asking for. And then you have, when you hear it, interpreting it. So that was very early on. I learned that, wow, dealing with different people, that was a really eye-opener for me. Right. And it also was an eye-opener for me from a developer standpoint of how important testing is. And I remember I had a developer, and he finished, I think he was writing in FoxPro, and he built something, and the first I took it for testing. As soon as I hit the keyboard, the thing crashed. And he says, well, you're not supposed to hit that key. I said, time out. Wrong answer. I said, the person at that keyboard has to be able to hit, they're going to hit every key on that keyboard. Mm-hmm. That system, it might not be a valid key, but it can't be crashing like that. Thinking like that of that person who's behind the keyboard, and knowing that everybody's different and they're coming from a different perspective. Early lesson that I learned, and took it through my whole career.
It definitely sounds like it would. And, like when you think about advice to give to people, or like when you think about the skills that you've learned and all of that, I mean, to me, that would be one that you would have as a shining example, right? There are certain things that you learn along the way that no matter if you're sitting on the beach talking to people, like you are right there in your backdrop, or not, just being able to understand and understand their persona, but just being in their shoes, right? Because computers have evolved so much over the last, 20 some years, right? You're talking about mainframes. I mean, early 2000s, you were teaching people what a desktop computer is and how to click a mouse, right?
Mm.
And that's real world situations that nowadays everything has advanced so far, but you still need, whether it's back in the day or even today, you still need to have those core skills to be able to listen,
Yeah,
understand,
yeah.
repeat back to people what it is, respect their respective point of view, because technology may advance, but people are still people and need understanding and need you to be able to relate to them.
And
Well,
develop, you mentioned personas. That's one of those BA techniques, develop personas, and that I don't think we do enough of. I seldom see companies want to invest in that, but you can't get away from it from a BA perspective if you really want to understand who you're delivering your product to. And like I said, if I think of the individuals that I've worked with over the years, I didn't know about personas at the time. I learned, just by hands-on of, oh, this is what this person's like, and this is who's the loading dock. Okay, well, these are the kind of people that are using the software we're building. The truck driver. Oh, we bought software and we're implementing it. Oh, this is the kind of people that are using it, and these are their tolerance levels, and this is their skill levels. That concept of personas, I think, is really valuable and underused. Because it takes time to develop them.
Right.
And so I think that's unfortunate that we don't get that opportunity to see those more in use.
I agree with you. And you think about it, like the transition, not just from technology or morphing into where, being a BA or a product manager, product owner is truly a thing. Whereas before they were, it was obscure, or you're like your hidden BA and all of that. But regardless of whether you're using agile or waterfall, some of these core skills translate, they stand the test of time. And I mean, we used to call things not personas, you'd call them user stories or requirements or whatever, but at the meat of many of these things, the principles are the same, right? You can call them different words, you can use different tools to record them and all of that, but it's really about people and engaging with people, and then having the skill set to take it to where it needs, the drift. And in a career, quite honestly, the drift is a lot of the fun pieces. I would have to say, it's like being able to like drift in a location, whether it's on purpose or it just something pulls you that direction, and not being able to flex your skills and muscles seems pretty amazing. And for you, you've had, a lot of accomplishments.
Well, I'd like to think that a lot of, that what I did brought value to those end users, because in the end, no matter what you do, if nobody's using it,
That is true.
And that's probably where some of the best satisfaction comes from too, is and that, again, back to that loading dock. When I went down to the loading dock and I saw that guy typing into a screen I built, I mean, that satisfaction was like, that was a big driver. It's like, wow, he's using something he comes to work and gets paid to use something I wrote.
That is awesome.
Yes, and that's the feeling I had. This is awesome, man. So
Right.
That was a driver to keep you moving on. And it also was a big driver to make me want it to be good for him, a good experience. I don't want him calling and complaining about this piece of garbage that I wrote. I mean, he didn't know I wrote. I mean, and I didn't write all of it. I mean, it's teamwork. So you got a team. As developers, I do a piece, you do a piece.
Right.
Together, collectively, we're supporting it in that. But that was a big driver, seeing that kind of success and then feeling that sense of I brought value to this guy's day.
Right. I mean, and you think about it, the things that we do as a BA or product owner really makes or breaks people's days or lives, right?
Oh my gosh.
People have higher levels of success when you understand their persona and can really deliver to them what they need, because then you're enabling them. So it's not just, about our teamwork and our delivery, but you're really allowing people to really take their career because you delivered to them what they needed to be successful, right? So, and I mean, so having
Not
that,
always an easy path, I will say, for
no,
people that are thinking that it's everything goes, oh, you brought this great value. Man, there are times when it can get rough.
yeah, that's true. But to your point earlier, testing, which is every time you brought up testing, I'm like, yes, testing, because that end user satisfaction at the end. I mean, you can hear what they're saying, you can take the requirements, you can do current state, future state modeling, get them in a, like a proof of concept, all of these types of things to get some more real-time feedback and all of that. But if you blow it on the testing and they end up getting something like those pictures where you've got a tree with a swing and half of the, the tree's cut out, or it's some weirdo type of thing, it's like, it's, you know, you have to test. And so, I don't know if all BAs have a passion for testing. I'd like to think that they do, but I respect that that's something that you very much have an interest in. So from a testing perspective, what was your, and this is, I'm totally going off in the woods here. Do you have a favorite test experience that you want to share?
I do have one that was a monumental event in many aspects, and I'll put it under the testing because it came under a POC
Okay.
as testing to prove. So this was a purchase software, and this was kind of the pinnacle and the pinnacle and the bottom of the barrel of my career, all rolled up in one project. So I had done, this was a software search, and these days we do a lot of software searches and evaluation. So I did this was looking for a particular package, software package, did evaluation, software search, put together a very in-depth, very formal evaluation of 3 candidate softwares, and put together a recommendation. And I mean, I was really proud of it. I mean, I'd done it. I mean, I'd like to pat myself on the back. Great job on it. Presented it to the CIO and director levels and stuff. So came and they took the recommendation and we went forward with it. One of the things that I did not account for, and I don't think we ever would, was fraud.
Oh,
This turned out to be, one of the things I did. Like I said, I and it's took me years to get over this issue. Part of putting this package together, and then when we went into contracts with the vendor, scalability was a big deal for us. And so I pushed, and we made sure we included in the contract a proof of concept to test and prove out scalability.
okay.
And we spent 2 years trying to get that proof of concept to scale and could not get it to scale. So the proof of concept, 2 years, and we failed to get that to scale up. I mean, we had nightly processes that were taking 88 hours to complete.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work well. Anyways, it through the whole, the lawsuits came up, contract became contested, went to arbitration.
Wow.
But we had, because that contract had, by risk analysis, recognizing that scalability was a huge factor for us at Kroger.
Okay.
And making that, highlighting that in the contract, that, and I had spelled out, here's the bare minimum they have to be able to achieve.
Right.
When it went into arbitration, that was one of the things that they could land on that contract, because that was spelled out in the contract. Because you're in arbitration, the whole legal world comes in. They start confiscating computers and that.
Oh, wow.
And they discovered fraud on the side of the vendor. Their technical analyst who was on site they found emails where he was given direct instructions to lie to us about the capabilities of the tool. Well, nobody plans on that. You
No.
believe everybody's coming, forthright in that. But and unfortunately, I mean, we won the arbitration, fortunately, plus damages and that. But we lost 2 years, and I really struggled with that. It's like, where did I go wrong? I mean, it felt like a failure to me. It took me a long time to recognize that because of the due diligence of risk assessment, our biggest risk was scalability. And emphasizing that in the contract, spelling out, here's how to mitigate that risk. We're going to mitigate it by doing a POC, and that POC has to meet these criteria. Yeah, we did lose time, but what we didn't do is we did not get trapped in a multi-million-dollar contract that couldn't be implemented. So, so
Wow.
from a testing standpoint, it was important to me. We got to test the software and prove that it works. And in that particular case, we were targeting a specific goal in the test, and that was
Right.
scalability. But it just goes to show that how important testing is, because testing is proof is in the pudding, and
Right.
the testing is where you can show that. And if you set your testing up to target what's important, you don't have to test every little,
Right.
pin, but you need to know what's important to you. And in this case, the scalability was critical. But any testing in it. So I've always been a big proponent that you need to recognize where's your biggest risk and make sure that you test and get yourself clear of that, of your major risk, and then work your way down into, from priority wise as to in your testing of highest priority, and then test down through everything else. And somewhere along the line, you have a cutoff that says, okay, if this fails, our mitigation is we can live with it and we can work with it going forward. But you need to do that risk assessment and find out what's critical, and then make sure you testing that to clear that out.
Well, that's excellent advice, because I mean, without doing the due diligence, the work that you did to understand what was needed, doing the risk assessment, having the sniff test, right? I mean, salespeople can come in and tell you all kinds of amazing things and have the perfect demo set up on their equipment or in their test environment, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to translate to your overall needs, even though they say it. And we have to admit, there have been times where vendors have not quite yet built out the capabilities, thinking that once I have them, I will just do what is needed to bring it forward, and they didn't really have it, right? I mean,
Yeah, they didn't have it, and the biggest problem there was the behind the scenes, that in the forefront they were lying to us flat out.
wow.
Behind the scenes, the legal teams discovered they were actually a lot of infighting within the vendor over the legality and morality of what they were doing within the company.
Wow.
So what we were getting were the lies up front, and we were struggling. But then when it went to arbitration, that's when all of this stuff came out, that what they were not working with us in a upfront fashion, and that. But that's an extreme case. But it definitely demonstrates the importance of doing a risk assessment, identifying what your high risks are, and making sure that you have some testing somehow to challenge those risks, and in order to, how you're going to handle these, and
Like, and that's, I mean, honestly, that's excellent advice for people new to the BA profession, right? Like, just not doing things, right? Taking techniques, artifacts, and doing them to complete them, but thinking through that holistic picture, right? Thinking of the risk, understanding that the risk assessment is so very important. So, I mean, no matter where you're at in your career, just always, step back for a second and really think about that, and then put that into your testing plan. Wow. Well, I'm glad that you survived.
yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Nobody looked at me as if it was my fault, because we clearly saw it's the vendor's fault. But it was
Right.
hard for me personally to say, where did I miss this? And it took me a long time to recognize the value of the test, the value of the POC, the value of recognizing the risk and making sure that it was the critical nature of that risk, and that there was a way to address it, and that because of that, we did not get trapped into a contract with that company.
Right.
But that's a hard thing. I mean, that was hard for me to come to grips with, because it felt like a failure. So, and that's probably the other thing I'd say. It's like, to people, when you're doing these things, that to me felt like a terrible failure, but in the real picture, it was a success.
A
We
great
lost 2
success.
years,
Right.
we lost 2 years, but we didn't lose. I mean, had we had been forced into that contract, we would have lost a lot more than just 2 years of testing effort.
Right. But also too, I mean, when you think about it, even though you had 2 years of doing a POC, you also had 2 years of refining requirements and
Oh,
user
yeah.
stories and functionality and people seeing things. They tell you what they need, you write it down, you may do some modeling, but until they're in there and they're doing testing. So you actually gained time on your next software that you were going to use because you had all of that defined or more defined because you spent that time doing the POC. So some loss, some gain, but overall, and to your point, doing proper testing throughout and just making sure that you're managing all aspects of this. Wow. So I would say that making it through that and being still delivering at the end, as far as saying, okay, we have to give up, that is a success. So even though it is sometimes hard to do that.
Doesn't always feel like it is, but
Yeah, because BAs do put their heart and soul into what they're doing, because the amount of focus and work that goes into moving things along, you do tend to give a little bit of yourself and leave a little bit behind, because of that. It's not just I'm clicking, I'm typing something and it's done. A lot of thought and passion go into it. So wow, the next question is going to seem less exciting. So from a satisfaction and or advice, knowing what you know now and living through all of these experiences, what would you, I mean, what would you say to people, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you've accomplished so much, you've given so much. And I say that from just having conversations with you and really relating to what you're saying. But what would you tell people? I mean, if you had some sage advice as far as being in this profession or drifting and still using all the skills that you have as a VA, what would you share?
as from like my satisfaction, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, well, Aaron put it in there. He's reading my mind. He's like, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Like,
Oh.
what you know now, like, so where you end up feeling happy on the beach.
Yeah. Probably a lot of just kind of think about who it is you're serving, to stop and think about that, because I've had so many, I mean, lots of stories, so many different instances where it was that end user that takes the brunt or gets the benefit of what you're doing, and stop and thinking about what am I doing and who is that going to help or hurt. Sometimes you can't help but hurt somebody. I mean, not everybody gets a benefit out of what you're doing,
Right.
but stopping and thinking about why am I doing this and who is this going to benefit, and then making sure that I always have that in mind.
Wow.
So that's why testing, when I think about testing, I mean, how many people you've been on something and a website crashes or something this isn't working right, and the level of frustration it creates. So always thinking about who's going to be using this and what can I do to prevent that level of frustration. So that's probably one of my top things, because that's where value comes in. I mean, we do a lot of things that you got to do because it's just part of the administrative or the need. It's mundane, it's routine, but it's important. that has to get accomplished, but that end user doesn't see that mundane stuff.
Right.
But it's all packaged together, and what is their experience going to be? So that's probably my first and foremost, because that's where I get the most satisfaction is when I have seen that loading dock worker, when I have seen that truck driver. I've sat with the truck driver on his route, and I know what he's doing, and I know what it means to him, and all the different people that when I have been boots on the ground, so to speak, they say,
Right.
with them in the trenches and living the day they live, and seeing how what I do or I'm about to do or what I did affected them, and whether they go home with a good day or not, is where I've always gotten satisfaction and value from what I've done, because they went home without frustration. It worked the way it was supposed to work, or I was there for them when they needed something. Because it's not everything I built. Sometimes you're supporting something somebody else did. And then you got problem solving to do. So probably the number one thing I think about is I always think about what can I do, and how is this going to affect the end? We call them end users. I don't know, but that person who is actually going to be using this, whatever you're doing, the tool, the application, the report, whatever it is you're developing. It's easy to get caught up in the weeds, but in the end, what does it mean to the final person who's going to be using this stuff, and what value does it bring to them? Because that's the value you're giving them.
That is truly inspiring.
And that takes patience.
That takes patience.
And patience is probably one of the things I don't have. I really have to work on that one. I get impatient easily, so I always have to really catch myself, and sometimes reminding myself of why I'm doing something, and to make sure I apply patience to it, because here's what it's going to mean if I stick this out. So
Right. Wow.
it takes a lot.
So may I interject a question here?
You can go ahead. I've just basking in what you just said. So
So am I, and I like all that you've talked about, Cathy, and that. And one thing that dawned on me was you were there before IIBA existed.
Yeah.
So you saw the introduction of the business analysis profession, the infant years, and seeing it grow in that. And I asked this because I remember the very first business analyst I worked with. We got him involved at the very end of the development process to test it before it went into production. So it's what we think of today as a QA tester and that. So are you seeing how the profession has progressed and matured, and that organizations are more utilizing the BA business analysis skills and all of that more closely? And I mean, back then it was, depends where you were and how the organization utilized those skills. So are they more in line with each other? Are they more like the Babak describes? And
I do think companies are more attuned to the skills, whether they're thinking in terms of a business analyst, because we all know that a lot of these business analysts are being reallocated to other titles, I'll say. But the concept of the analytical need, the need for that analysis to be done, companies, I still think companies are shortchanging themselves of not recognizing directly the value of the IIBA and the intensity of that role and activity, but they do recognize the need for the analysis. And I think as data has become such a bigger and bigger and bigger animal, and it's been going that way for a long time. How do you get data? What data do you need? How are you going to get it? How are you going to store it? How are you going to use it? How am I going to mine it? And then now you get into the AI, and it can only live on data. So I think companies are recognizing the need for the analysis. I think where they struggle is how do they get it? And I would like to see companies embrace the IIBA more and more. But I think they do recognize the people that are in the space and the people that have those skills, and the companies want that. They know they need that. So from that aspect, yeah, I think they're lined up and saying we need people that can do analysis and can come, help us with that. Whether they draw a direct connection to the IIBA, to those certifications, not so sure companies there, because you see a lot of these companies drifting away from the center of excellence and stuff like that.
Right.
But they're not drifting away from the need for that analytical skill. And that is one of the things that I think that certification does show. I mean, that is, a way to demonstrate, it to a company that you've got those analytical skills and you've proven them through a certification that's a very robust certification. I mean, it's not a simple, oh, I sent my money in and I get it. So I do think that's one of the big values of the certification, is it is a way to demonstrate that you've got those skills. And companies know that they need analytical skills. Finding people with those skills is the challenge on the company side. And that's why that certification is helpful, because something that you can show that they can take away and say, okay, we need these skills. This person has a way to demonstrate that they've got them. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more or anything about that. And I have been often asked if the ECBA, the Entry Certificate in Business Analysis, is worth getting from the more newer to the profession and everything. And one thing I always advise them is, what that does is set you apart from the crowd. If a job or a hiring manager, gets 80 applications for one, position in that, and 1 or 5 people have the ECBA, guess who's going to the top of the line?
Right.
Right.
It's something that demonstrates, I mean, it's something concrete that an external organization has recognized your capabilities, no matter which level you've got to that certification. At some level, I mean, you've demonstrated to another certifying party that you got the skills, at least to that point. And as you go through, up to the CBAP. Yeah, I totally agree, Aaron.
And the independent certifying body is the important part. IIBA doesn't do training for their certifications and that. They leave it to their education partners to do that, or their chapters.
And well, you think about it, having been involved with the IIBA Bluegrass chapter and some other chapters, and then participating in either reviewing the ECBA materials or being part of study groups where somebody else is leading it, not starting out as a BA by name, but drifting into it or having other types of things. It is amazing how many skills that you have that you just don't even realize that you have. So to Aaron, to your point, from an IIBA perspective, it's just that awareness, like, wow, these are core competencies that are out there that people sometimes just naturally do because they need to get the work done, that with this, even in the ECBA or the tie-ins becoming part of the IIBA community, you can really just go from here to here in no time at all with resources. Like even talking with Cathy, think about the advice that she gave us tonight. Like there were some great nuggets that even me, thinking that, I've been doing this for a while, I'm like, oh no, I've taken notes on some things that I really need to think about or refocus on. So it's important.
We did have a question in the chat. Now that you're retired, what's next? What do we have to look forward to?
Yeah, don't put it that way. My goodness. So I did keep my.
We do see you out there on the beach.
Yeah, really, I wish I was actually there at the moment sometimes. But so I kept my certification. I have not retired that. So put a lot of work into getting that, and I've renewed it 4 times now. So I'm kind of attached to it. But you know, things like this, staying involved, staying aware. But right now, my retirement just did it. You know, I've just retired, so I'm still trying to get my act together. And I find my biggest challenge right now is I'm so used to that structured routine and having my work calendar. You know, the first thing you do is you look at your work calendar and you live on it all day long. I don't have my work calendar now, so it's like getting used to living on another calendar. It's like, how does this work? I'm not, you know, 45 years of work calendars. Now all of a sudden it's like, where's my calendar at? But no, I mean, right now, I mean, I haven't really settled into stuff. Things are still up in the air, but staying in touch with the whole community. And like I said, I'm been at this for a while, so I'm kind of attached to it. So just keeping my a little bit of my nose into what's going on.
Well,
So.
I don't think the community is going to let you leave. So you may get to take a siesta on the beach, but you're definitely going to continue to be part of the community. I mean, with your experiences and all that you have to share. I mean, so many people can learn so much from you that it would be a shame if you didn't stay in touch with all of us. And we certainly have enjoyed talking to you today. It's been.
Well, I think VA is a way of life. So I mean, because it's a way of thinking. It's not something you turn on and turn off. It's just the way you think and the way you act and interact. So it's not something you can just walk away from.
Okay, that sounds like it's a t-shirt or a mug or a mouse pad. VA is a way of life. Quite honestly, it does. So, Aaron, do we have any more questions? I mean, did people want to come off of mutants and just have a conversation with Cathy? They're certainly welcome to.
I don't see any other questions. I'm seeing a bunch of thank yous and great stories.
Tara asked how many bananas
accolades.
are transported on a ship. Depends on the size of the ship. I was assigned on the Great White Fleet, and I made a lot of trips to Europe supporting that that branch of IIBA, and been on board some of those ships. So it's
wow,
it's fascinating industry. But who would have guessed about bananas?
Well, Cathy, it has been an absolute pleasure having the opportunity to talk to you today. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. So my end user experience has been amazing. Definitely not disappointed at all. And we really do appreciate you taking the time to spend it with us and hear, you know.
She froze up on me there. Or maybe I froze.
All of the great advice and learn what you're going to do next. And
well, I appreciate you having me. It's been a long career, but a very rewarding one. And
well, I know I enjoyed working with you, Cathy, you know, these last several years and everything. And, you know, really appreciate all the advice and everything over those years and what you gave us this evening. So hope everybody enjoyed the conversation and got a lot out of this. You may join us next week. Next Wednesday is our regular chapter meeting, talking about one of the things Cathy talked about tonight in risk management from a BA's perspective. And that so should be another enlightening discussion and everything. So thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate your engagement with the chapter and you know, all you do for the business analysis profession. So thank you very much. Glad you were here and have a wonderful rest of your week.
thank you.
And thank you again, Cathy. We'll be talking soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take one.
So yeah, still a lot of thank yous and, you know, great discussion in the chat. So they liked it. They really enjoyed.
I hope so. It's 45 years, lots of things, a lot of water has gone under 5 years.
It was fantastic. I love your advice.
They're just,
Truly do.
there's always certain things, and I mean, I'm sure everybody's got them. There's things that stand out in their head as to what made a difference in their career or just in their day-to-day life. And but it's funny how some of the things that really, like the story about the loading dock, I never forgot that experience of working with that loading dock worker, that and recognizing that, you know, the perspective he had and the perspective I had weren't the same, and it was up to me to help him move along. You know, and the truck drivers, oh my gosh, truck drivers, Lordy, wonder I didn't get fired.
Yeah, I'm not sure English is the first language for any truck driver.
Well, this was when I was working for Takeda, and this was the route drivers down in Florida. So you're looking down in, you know, Miami, you got a lot of these guys, you know, Spanish is their first language, English is their second, and none of them had home computers, and they didn't know how to use a computer. And I mean, we had a whole rollout plan set up, and I had laid it out real carefully, but I'd been down there for weeks. So I went home for a week. We started the implementation, and I mean, the first thing you had to do was teach them keyboards and all the other stuff. Well, when I went home, then I came back, and while I was gone, the manager and assistant manager thought everything was going so well, they didn't think they thought they could speed the implementation schedule up because it had gone so well. So they just put everybody on it. Those truck drivers were threatening to quit. I mean, it's a wonder they didn't kill us all. And talk about having to think on your feet. I mean, when I went there and I'm like, what have you guys done? These drivers were screaming and yelling and threatening to quit. And oh my gosh. And I mean, talk about scrambling. And the next morning I spent half the night there at the distribution center. And the next morning I see the district manager pull into the parking lot. And it's like, I was out into the parking lot to meet him. I wasn't waiting for him to get inside. And I had to jump. It's like, I told him, it's like, we got a problem here, and here's what we're going to do to handle it. Because I'd have been fired if I hadn't, but he did. But I mean, again, it comes down to that, you know, that end user, the perspective of that end user. Those poor truck drivers, they've been driving all day. The last thing they need when they come back to the depot is this paperwork and the computer they don't know how to use. And oh my gosh,
It's
that was a nightmare.
And it's interesting that, you know, like with implementation plans and all of that, even when things are going well, just
She'll be back.
leave it alone. Let the plan
Maybe
ride.
there she is.
Am I fading in and out?
Yeah,
you freeze there for a minute. And that,
you freeze occasionally in that. But I got your point. I mean, yeah, when things are going well, you fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, this was a piece of cake, and not realizing it was a piece of cake because you were doing it right. And as soon as you
change
under yourself, oh, trouble. Yeah, and that's what happened. I did a great job of setting up the implementation plan. What I didn't do is a great job of prepping my implementation team to stick to the plan. That's where that one went wrong. So,
no matter what the managers say.
Yeah. But
I remember when I was learning to code, and this was the very first mid-range IBM mid-ranges that came out, the System 38.
Yeah.
And we implemented, I was at a freight company that had 8 terminals, so they were regional. And one of the very first things I did for one of the users was to put at last option selected on the menu, because he said the system was so slow. He would select an option on the menu, let it run, go get his coffee, and then come back. And by the time he came back, he forgot what he did.
Yeah, that happens. That happens even today. Yeah, so then you get thought about what that end user's experience is going to be, and recognizing that they've lost their place. They don't, and it's like they don't know where they're at.
In 2 or 3 minutes, right?
Oh yeah. And your point though, back then, I mean, and at the time, it was probably not